And so our conviction is when we see something in the world and we know, you know what, that's just not right. That tears at my heart. But calling is then answering that pain, that discomfort, and doing something about it. And I think those are important starting places for a hero.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win, we come to fly. This is where we make our dreams come to life. Welcome to Innovation City.
Welcome to Innovation City, a podcast featuring innovators, disruptors, and creators who are breaking through the status quo to change the way business happens today. These are exciting times. My name is Tyler Kelly. I'm with my co-host, Michael Johnson, and we're here in beautiful Miami at the CIC building in Wynwood. And big thanks to our host, Venture Cafe, the largest Thursday gathering of innovators who are making things happen. I'm super excited because today we have Rodney Bullard with us, and this is an amazing man.
Yeah, I am super excited as well. So Rodney has spent his prolific career serving others. He is a U.S. Air Force veteran, and he currently serves as the Vice President of Community Affairs at Chick-Fil-A. He's also the Executive Director of the Chick-Fil-A Foundation. So prior to joining Chick-fil-A, Rodney was an Assistant U.S. Attorney General and a White House Fellow at NASA. At Chick-fil-A, he led the startup organization's Operational Corporate Foundation, where he directs community affairs, philanthropy, and community service. Rodney lives in Atlanta with his wife and son, and his first book, Heroes Wanted, Why the World Needs You to Live Your Heart Out, is available now. Now, Rodney, Tyler and I are big fans of Atlanta. We have traveled there on occasion, and there's lots of good people and lots of good food in Atlanta. So my question to you is, if it's Sunday and Chick-fil-A is closed, where are you going to eat in Atlanta?
That's a great question, gentlemen. First, thank you all for having me. It's truly my pleasure to be here. If it is Sunday, then I'm probably eating at my mother's house because her chicken is as good as that at Chick-fil-A, but not commercially available. So,
Okay. That's a good answer. Maybe we can get an invite there at some point.
We would love to host you, my friend. We have a place. You pull up a seat, and we'll make sure we do that.
There you go. So we're from St. Louis, and so when we go to Atlanta, we're like, this is how it's supposed to be. Now, obviously, as tourists and, being in certain segments of the city, we don't probably see everything that's going on. But for many St. Louisans of every part of society, like when they go to Atlanta, they're like, wow, this is the real deal.
No, I think that's right. Atlanta is an extremely dynamic city. And it's dynamic for so many different reasons. It's dynamic because of the education hub that you have there in Georgia Tech, in Georgia State, and Kennesaw State, but also the Atlanta University Center with Morehouse and Spelman and Clark Atlanta University and Morris Brown and Morehouse School of Medicine. And all of those dynamic education institutions have really fueled the talent that is attracted to Atlanta, but also stays in Atlanta. And then you also have a city that is an outsized headquarters for Fortune 500 companies. And many of them were started in Atlanta, such as Coca-Cola. But others have moved to Atlanta, such as Mercedes-Benz and Porsche, and also UPS. And you just have a whole host of large Fortune 500 companies that really are headquartered in Atlanta. And we also have this thing that we call the Atlanta Way, that everybody pitches in, that everybody gives their part. But you're right, Atlanta is a wonderful city, but it also has its difficulties. And at Chick-fil-A, we get a chance to address those difficulties head on, be aware of them. We don't sweep them under the rug. But even more so, I'm very proud that the businesses that I talked about, a SunTrust Bank, a Coca-Cola, Equifax, all have come together so that we can collectively address those issues in Atlanta. And so that is a model that we think works well. And we hope other cities like St. Louis, Miami, et cetera, will follow those opportunities as well.
So you mentioned all those companies as well as Chick-fil-A. So as part of your job, obviously you're coming together to solve some of those problems.
Yes.
Is part of your job to rally some of those people together and get cooperation?
It is, and I think this is a unique approach that Atlanta has taken, but also that Chick-fil-A has taken. We don't think about what we do as charity or philanthropy. We think about it as leadership. We think about it as our reasonable service. We think about There are opportunities for politicians, there are opportunities for nonprofit organizations, but there are also opportunities for-profit organizations to be a part of leadership, and leadership is about solving hard problems. And so we have to be a part of that solution. It's not proper that we just sell a chicken sandwich and we aren't a part of the solution. And so it's within the DNA of the Cathy family, it's within the DNA of Chick-fil-A. In fact, our corporate purpose, part of our corporate purpose, says to have a positive influence on everyone we come in contact with. Says nothing about waffle fries or that great classic chicken sandwich, but it says in part to have a positive influence on everyone we come in contact with. And that's important.
So how did this all start for you? So you've had a career, like a record of kind of creating a positive influence where you go. So tell me where that all started for you.
Yeah, so, it all started for me with my parents. My father, a Baptist minister, my mother, an educator, really taught me the importance of respecting everyone, regardless of whether they were pauper or king. They taught me to respect everyone. And I saw my father live that out on a daily basis. He brought often men home, and he would give them what I probably thought to be menial jobs, but for them they were life-changing jobs, working on rental properties and sweeping and cutting grass. And even more than the jobs, he engaged and mentored them, and he has lifelong relationships with many of these men. And consequently, I have lifelong relationships. But my father also played for the Denver Broncos when he was younger. He also graduated from Morehouse College. He also was involved in politics. And so he had a broad network where I understood that you could also know the kings and the wealthy and the business person as well. And that really, quite frankly, one was not different than the other. Just different opportunities, different exposure, different life experiences. So I think that's where it started for me, a life of service.
It's amazing that you bring that up, that idea of the perception that we have of ourselves.
Yes.
Because part of the listening audience are people that want to do something. They have that drive, that desire, that passion, but they haven't taken that step for one reason or another. A lot of times it's because they just don't think they have what it takes.
No, that's absolutely right. You mentioned in the intro that I've written a book called Heroes Wanted. And the simple premise of the book is that we all have a hero within us, and that we all have the obligation, the responsibility, and the capacity to reach out and make a difference in someone else's life. It may be in small ways, it may be in significant ways. It frankly may be multiple times throughout a day with multiple people, but we have to be intentional about doing that. And oftentimes people do short themselves on their capacity and their ability to help others. They think, well, I only have so much time, or I only have these skills. And so the book turns only on its head and says, well, only I have this skill, and only I have this time and opportunity to give back. And I think about it, we all have only a drop in the bucket to give, but our collective drops fill the bucket. And so I hope that people will reach out, particularly across division and divide. As we are here in Miami, I think about and I look out, and there's this rich diversity here, and this rich diversity of entrepreneurs right here in this building that we're sitting in this facility. And that's so important, that we get to know each other as humans. We get to know each other in a way that allows us to be empathetic and allows us to connect. So thank you all for doing that and making sure that you all are doing your part as well.
Yeah, in my life, I've found that typically, biases come from not knowing the other person.
Yes, I think that's right. Bias is often a matter of ignorance. It's often the story we tell ourselves, as Brene Brown would say. And the story we tell ourselves is based off of our own limited experiences and our own limited perspectives. And when we broaden those perspectives, when we meet somebody new, we're enriched, we're better for it. And throughout America, there are neighborhoods where communities are thriving, but there are also neighborhoods where communities are struggling. And oftentimes the two do not meet. And that's in Atlanta as well. And so those are opportunities we have to connect.
So how does one do that? How does one cross whatever divide is there between people to connect and understand the people around you?
Yeah. So I think that's a great question. I think the first way is to be a friend and to be intentional about being a friend. We do come in contact with people who are different, and to not allow anything that is political or anything that is in some way different from a racial standpoint or ethnic standpoint or a business economic standpoint to divide us. I recall at Chick-Fil-A we had this big project in which we were going into a neighborhood that was different than the neighborhood in which many Chick-fil-A employees and staff live. And a young lady said, well, how do I connect? How do I reach out? How do I engage? Because quite frankly, I'm a little bit uncomfortable. And I told her that, embracing your discomfort is fine. But being a friend is no different in this community than it is in your community. And I think that's important for us to understand. Yes, absolutely.
Because sometimes it takes a community.
Yes, sir, it does. In the book, I talk about 9 C's, and really I dissect the anatomy of a hero. And it's a guidebook on how to be a hero. And we start with calling, and I think that conviction and calling are so important. And all the C's are intertwined. And so our conviction is when we see something in the world and we know, that's just not right. That tears at my heart. That makes me sad. That makes me ill. But calling is then answering that pain, that discomfort, and doing something about it. And the book talks about that. And I think those are important starting places for a hero.
And you said that everyone is a hero.
Yes.
So, like in your personal, you had an amazing upbringing, and we've been blessed to have an amazing upbringing too. But for the people that haven't,
yes,
how do they find that hero?
I tell the story of my first grade teacher. I went to a private school in Atlanta. I started off at a private school in Atlanta in first grade, very posh, prestigious private school. My parents, again, were a Baptist minister and an educator, and they were scraping to send me to school. And I didn't know that they were scraping to send me to school, but I did know I was struggling when I was there. And at some point, my parents received a call, and the lady on the other end said, hey, Rodney's a fine young man, but he's not reading on grade level. And my mother had a decision to make, and she decided to move me from that school, and she put me in another private school, but a less prestigious school in a less prestigious part of town. And I met a little lady by the name of Mrs. Adams on the first day, and she was my first grade teacher. And at the end of the school year, she also called my mother and said, hey, Rodney's not reading on grade level. And what she said was different than the first school. She said, I would like to take the time to teach him to read phonetically. And she did that throughout the summer. She tutored me as I was driven to her house every day throughout the summer. And at the end of the summer, I was reading 2 grade levels ahead of my peers. And I wouldn't be here if it weren't for her. I tell that story because whenever I tell that story, everybody thinks about a hero that they had, somebody who invested in them, regardless of whether they had a great upbringing, a happy circumstance as a child. Everybody can think about somebody who paid attention to them. It was a kind word. It was a feeling that they were given. Everybody can think about that one person. And I hope that when they think about that one person, they're inspired to be that person, to give it and pay it forward.
I like that story because a lot of times it's during childhood when we're shaped, for the better or for the worse.
That's right. That's right.
And so for those people out there that was shaped for the worse, that have those memories that they go back to where the teacher said, you aren't good enough.
Yes.
What kind of encouragement would you give those people?
Yeah, I just finished watching the movie Black Panther, and I thought it was a great movie for a whole host of reasons. But one of the things I thought about was that we all have a superpower, and you can't let someone take your superpower. And one of your superpowers is your confidence, your belief in yourself. And people will tell you that you can't do something. People will tell you that you are not going to amount to much. People will have all sorts of conditions and expectations that they put on you that are wrong. And we have to be very careful from a personal standpoint to be strong enough, to be confident enough, and one of the C's is confidence, to say, I know who I am. I know my strength, I know my superpower, and even more so, I'm humble enough to use that in the benefit of someone else, because that's why I was put here on this earth, to do that, to help someone else. And so I do believe that we have to be courageous and confident.
So does everybody have the same superpowers, or are there some common?
I think that's a great question, my friend. I think that there are definitely common superpowers, but, nobody has the same abilities. Nobody has the same experiences. Everybody has something unique to give, and that's why everybody can be a hero. Dr. King said, greatness is not found in subject-verb agreement. It's not found in your title or your job, but we all can be great because we all can serve. And at times, I think that we hear that and that sounds trite, but it's not trite. We have to get past that because we do have to give back. And even more so when we think about our own personal lives, we want somebody to be our hero. We appreciate it when we had that opportunity, when we had that experience, when we were recognized, when someone talked to us and in a sea of people, no one may have been paying attention, but someone paid attention. That's important.
So what's the world look like when masses, when let's just say the majority of people, the greater vision for Heroes Wanted is to see heroes manifest?
Absolutely.
So what happens when that starts to happen? What's the world look like?
Well, I think we have true community. I think that we move past just social media, which I think is community unto itself, so I don't discount that. But I think we have true community, and I think we're a happier place. And I truly believe that we often see heroes in the news, and we aggrandize heroes in such a way that heroes have capes and they fly through the air, and they're singular beings. They are one person who has a superpower, who is ultra or uber wealthy. But I don't believe that's how we get there. I believe we get there by the masses saving the masses, and each one doing their part, much more powerful than waiting on Superman.
Mm-hmm.
So what's stopping everyone from their superpowers? What's stopping that vision from happening?
I think what's stopping folks is that, just like anything else, it has to be called out. People have to be encouraged. People have to know, and you have to be reminded. The most powerful lesson of any book isn't to teach you a new lesson, but to remind you of a lesson that you already knew, that you already recognized to be true. And I think most people in their heart recognize this lesson to be true. And so it's just a matter of saying, hey, this is the truth, and let's get to doing it. Let's be about the truth.
That the message of Heroes Wanted reminds me of there's a tribe in Africa. I'm going to have to put it in the show notes because I don't remember which one.
Sorry.
It starts with a U. I do know that. But the mother, when the baby is in her belly, the mother sings a song. And this is the song of that baby's identity.
Yes.
And have you heard this story before?
I've not.
You're going to love this.
Yeah.
So whenever that child, after he or she is born, gets into trouble, gets into mischief or something like that, the entire community, they come around and they form a circle and they sing that baby's song.
I love that.
And it reminds him or her who they are.
Yes, absolutely. And it takes a village, and that is true. Again, a trite phrase used in political reference, but true. It takes a village. And so I love that. That's cool. Let me know the tribe.
I will.
Yeah. That might be in my second book.
Yeah.
I'll attribute it to you, though.
So what other advice can you offer to, maybe not just the person who had the upbringing where they didn't have a hero they could look to, but maybe somebody had those heroes, but they're not telling themselves the right story, or they're trying to accomplish something. They're coming up against some adversity.
Yeah, I think that we always will come up against adversity. I think it's natural. I think it's expected that we will come up against adversity. And so we have to have courage in the midst of that adversity. And oftentimes when we come up against adversity, we don't know what's on the other end. I like to tell the story of Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks, on December 1st, 1955, got on a bus. She was a seamstress with a high school education. And she didn't intentionally get on the bus to cause a stir or do anything but go home. It was in the evening, it was raining, and she gets on the bus and she sits back on the fifth row of the bus. That's the first row that African Americans were allowed to sit in. But she knew at some point, because it was raining, more people would likely take the bus on this day than on prior days. And so at some point, there were white people standing up, And Rosa Parks looks and she thinks to herself, they're going to ask me to move. She's sitting right next to the window. She's on the right side of the bus. And at some point, James Blake, the bus driver, does stop the bus. And he gets up and he said, y'all got to go. And he's referencing the African Americans who are sitting there on the front row so that white people could sit down. And Rosa Parks watches as African Americans next to her and on the other side of the bus get up and go to the back of the bus. And at that point, she nuzzles in and she says, not today. At that point, she says, I've seen what's wrong. I'm convicted, not today. And because of her defiance on that day, the civil rights movement really started in earnest. And even more so, because of the boycott of the Montgomery bus system, Dr. King was recruited to the effort, a new pastor from Atlanta in Montgomery, a young pastor. And the rest is history. So we don't know always what the end looks like. We know the end of the story for Rosa Parks, but she didn't know the end of the story at the time. So we have to be courageous to say, you know what, on this day, I'm going to do what's right.
Because her story is still making ripples and inspiring people.
Without question. And I tell her story because oftentimes, people don't know the full story, or children in particular don't know the story. And I think it's important for us to recognize that, Rosa Parks was a seamstress, high school education. All the cards were stacked against her, and a small, diminutive woman. But we've had heroes like Rosa Parks for a long time in this country and around the world. And so that's evidence that we want heroes, we need heroes, and we are heroes.
And we stand on those heroes' shoulders.
Without question. Yeah, without question.
So Heroes Wanted, how can people get the book?
So people can go to Amazon, or they can go to Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold, Christian books as well. The book is written from my own Christian faith perspective, but I don't think that limits the reader. Mm-hmm. You can read this book and think, you know what, I'm here and I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a business person, and I want to give back. Just like this place we're in, right? They're giving back to kids right next door who are learning about business and venture capital and entrepreneurship. And so you can give back in many ways, and regardless of your own faith perspective. And so, but again, you can go to heroeswantedbook.com. You can go to Amazon. You can go to Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold.
And if people want to get in touch with you, are you on Twitter?
I am on Twitter. So Rodney.Bullard on Twitter, and also Rodney.Bullard at Instagram as well.
All right. And we'll put that in the show notes. Rodney, it's been a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you, my friend.
This has been an inspiring conversation. And,
thank you.
Before this, I didn't know, what you were doing, or necessarily like how deeply involved you were in community.
Yes.
And now I'm a fan. So
thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to work for Chick-Fil-A. It's a pleasure to work with gentlemen like you all. Continue to do what you do. God bless.
For more episodes, visit innovationcity.co and be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. If you're in Miami, visit us at Venture Cafe on Thursday nights. You can find details at venturecafemiami.org and connect with us on social at We Are Slam and Venture Cafe MIA.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is